Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. In this video, I will review in chapter 12 is about psychoanalytic approaches to cultural and the self. The relationship between cultural theory and psychoanalytic theory is a complex one, but have similarities in seeing social life as basically meaning and emphasizing the need for interpretation. Relationships are centered over two themes. First, the psychoanalysis tends to focus on individual pathologies rather than collective phenomena. Second, there is a tendency toward the psychoanalytical and biological reductionism in much of the psychoanalytic thought. Sigmund Freud is the founder of psychoanalysis. Freud challenged the assumption that the self is only what can be seen on the surface. First, he stated that there is a fundamental separation between the conscious mind and the hidden mind, the subconscious conscious mind. This happens in content interaction. What lies beside these two levels is the division of the soul between the id, ego, and superego. The id is the realm of primitive intents for immediate gratification. The ego maintains a stable sense of self and adapts to reality. It's a place of reason and common sense. The feeling of conscience and morality can be found in the superego. It comes from society and especially from outreach and parental authority. In Freud's understanding, self is closely related to sexuality, instinct, and pleasure. According to his theory of the pleasure principle, the self is constantly trying to fulfill biological and instinctive needs based on the id. It's associated with sensual pleasure. Babies can satisfy this through orifice stimulation, breastfeeding, defecation, genital stimulation. But as we grow up and achieve selfishness, we must control these urges. They are then buried or depressed in the subconscious, which sometimes lead to neurosis, depression, obsession, and other psychic pathologies. Psychoanalytic theory has not stopped since Freud dead. General characteristics of the late psychoanalytic theory include 1. Decreased emphasis on individual psychoanalytic pathology as a cause of neurosis and a compensatory interest in relationship between people or between people and objects. 2. Focus on how people and their cultural organization are involved in problems experienced by themselves. And last 3, an understanding of the modern person as an emotional damaged, isolated person and suffer from a poor identity. This has replaced Freud's image of sexual and neurotical depravity. For those influenced by structuralism, post-structuralism, and discourse analysis, Jacques Lacan, writing of the 1950 and 1960 arcade to theorizing about cultural association and psychoanalysis. One reason for this is that this broad post-structural approach shifts the responsibility for self-construction from a biological drive toward language and culture. According to Lacan, the substance is structured like language. It's a domain of signs, markers, and concepts that must be translated using techniques similar to those spearheaded by source. In his Acrates, Lacan set out to challenge or destabilize the concept of coherence, the unity self, and replace it with the notion of self as fiction or fantasy. Central to this argument is the concept of the mirror stage. Lacan suggests that during the mirror stage, babies come to see themselves in the mirror and thus create the illusion of self-unity. Far from being natural, the world of language is a patriarchal one, and for this reason, Lacan consider it the law of the father. The key marker in the father's law is the phallus. It represents male authority and sexuality, and replaces Freud's somewhat biological focus on the penis. For Lacan, male domination and identity are entitled in the symbolic power of the phallus, whereas women are defined in terms of their work on both the conscious and the unconscious mind to both decide and give people what is known as the subject position. There are imaginary senses of self that people adopt as they go through life. Deftly combining psychoanalytic theory of self with structuralist understanding of culture, Lacan's work has had a special impact on cultural theory, particularly in the field of psychoanalytic feminism and literary and film criticism. Work in this post-structural tradition has several main features. One, there is a focus on the ways identity created by language, tech, and the ways in which these relate to power. Two, important ideas, persistence, or problematic true self. And the last three, desire, fantasy, and illusion are understood to reproduce inequalities because they are constructed by symbolic structures which in turn are shaped by power. As we move from post-structural theory to postmodern psychoanalytic theory, more and more attention is being paid to the problem of desire and pleasure together with the attack on the concept of the subject of unity as the storehouse of desire. Anti-Oedipus by Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari is perhaps the most important text in this tradition. The book celebrates schizophrenia, fragmentation, and desire as radical tendencies in contemporary culture. Schizophrenia was elevated to a kind of heroic status as a bearer of the unregulated. In schizophrenia, Deleuze and Guattari detect the fluidity, uncertainty, and multiplicity that threaten the order and authority necessary for capitalism reproduction. This desire is no longer residing in individually, subjectively, but rather circulates randomly and incoherently through the human body and soul operation as a wanting machine. The rise of capitalism depends on regimentation and control of will. At the heart of this process is the Oedipus complex, which transforms the surface and ties them to the soul in repressive ways. Sherry Turkey cleverly read anti-Oedipus as a celebration of naturalism. It's the idea the society is associated with oppression and only returns to a pre-social, spontaneous, and pre-symbolic order that can bring out authenticity and freedom. A similar current flows through Christopher's contrast between semiotic and symbolic. Jean-François Lyotard, considered by many to be the leading commentator on postmodernism, has also explored the relationship between passion, cultural, and the capitalism economy. For Lyotard, ideology, ideology ideology worth the multiplication of libidinal desire and energy rather than repression and distortion. In this respect, his work has a clearer parallel to Foucault's history of sexuality or Bataille's idea of heterology compared to psychoanalytic works such as the one at the Frankfurt School. The image he drew was of a society governed by unregulating the vice of desire, which energized the system of production and consumption. For Lyotard, capitalism thrives by channeling this libidinal desire and energy through the reproduction of sex and commodities. Leo Lyotard suggests that we take advantage of the pleasurable moment of this flow of desires, enjoying the diversity and intensity of passion as they circulate and develop in late capitalism. Psychoanalytic theory has clearly overlaid the most complex and intriguing discourse about the self. This is an area marked by continuous theoretical innovation that has attracted a number of great thinkers to its rank. This includes the following points. 1. Many of the central claims of psychoanalysis remain untested. Positivists argue that this is more akin to religion than to science. 2. Like in any other major area, psychoanalytic theory has developed a language of its own. 3. It works with the priori belief that people are depressed, neurotic, sick, and so on. This gloomy and unrelenting pessimistic outlook makes it difficult to apply this theory an appreciative explanation of human creativity. And the last 4, there are lingering problems with the application of models designed to cure problematic individuals with sociological analysis of collective phenomena. Slippage and ambiguity are frequent in the movement of analysis from the micro to the macro level. This can sometimes involve vague ideas giving rise to hazy collective thoughts or generalization about how modern people think and feel.